Hello and welcome to this final part where we're going to refine the hair to a more proper final stage. So to start off, I hid all the polygrooves that I didn't want to work on, and using the clay buildup, I'm starting to sculpt in some of the smaller strands. Now that we have separated the big chunks into smaller parts, it's easier just to hide some parts and work on the parts you need. That will help break off the overall shape. And now we can start to give in some more refined flow to the shapes of the strand. So more or less the same thing as we did on the concept sculpt, except this time we are working with, we're not working with Dynamesh, we're working with subdivisions. And since there's a pinching geometry due to the topology, there's a little bit of pinching on the bottom, but you can clean it up with hard polish. So it's not a very big issue. And if you want to take it a step further, you can always Z-remesh your model and fix that. So we're going to go over the entire hair and roughen the flow of the hair and smooth it out, and trying to break the sides a bit so that it flows better with the group that is next to it. Doesn't have a flat edge. We're trying to mimic the way the hair wraps and flows. So this is a very quick process, and already it gives us a lot more. It breaks off the shape into a lot more pleasant hair shape. Like so. See, in just a couple of minutes, you can really sell the hairstyle a lot. I made the brush a bit smaller since I figured the strands of hair on the front would be smaller chunks of hair than rather than big lumps. Okay, now that we have made that, we're going to move and tweak the geometry so it doesn't intersect as much. And with the pinch brush, we're gonna make it taper into a more pointy, sharper end. Doing a bit of cleanup on the sides. Using the clip curve to taper and perhaps make some cuts to break off the edge a bit, give it more interest. Since the topology isn't very nice on the bottoms of our hair strands, you can see some artifacts appearing. You can retopo with Z-Remesher to clean that up, or you can just spend a bit of time to clean it up with a hard polish, smooth, letting go shift. Mostly it won't be very visible, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time cleaning that up, but it is something you could definitely fix. But for the purpose of this demo, I won't make it super clean. Now with the Damien standard brush, we're like in the first step, we're just making essentially the same thing as in the first step, except we're doing this on a smaller scale and in a more refined state. A hard polish Damien standard brush, we're picking the strands we want to make pop out. We're making cuts, we're making decisions, where we've created a lot of happy accidents with the clay tube brush, and now we're going to refine those accidents and make artistic decisions on what we want to reinforce and what we want to leave a bit more subdued. But you should always make decisions. You should always make. You shouldn't leave your audience making all the decisions all the time. So sometimes you have to be brave enough to make some big cuts and sharp edges that you decided were needed, instead of leaving everything about the same level and just letting the watcher resolve everything for you. Do a bit of both. Also, we carve in with the Damien standard brush, but sometimes we lift the surface. We make it go up using Alt to mimic some hair flowing on the top of the mass of the hair. You just don't want just to go digging in all the time. You want to lift the surface up a bit for visual interest. More cleaning, since that's the front mesh, the front hairpiece, the one that you see the most. Yeah, spend a little bit of time cleaning what people will see the most. Renaming. Should have done that from the start. Just because it's easier to manage and pick each subtool. Spend less time hiding every subtool just to find the right one. I duplicated the subtool for the left side of the hair to add some underlaying, another layer of hair below, because it was showing off a bit too much. When you look from below, you could see too much below the hair, but I didn't spend too much time on it. But it's definitely something you should maybe think about, depending on your haircut, is layering the hair. So here on this haircut, we mostly have hair falling from the top of the head, but we could have we could have added a layer of hair flowing from the middle of the head, then from the bottom of the hair scalp, and that would sell the idea maybe of a fuller head, a little more proper. So here I added a subtool, a sphere, and I am using a hairbrush that I found on the internet, and that I will link in the description below. But essentially, it's just what is it called? A curved tube with a fall off in a particular, just a bunch of settings for the fall off. So essentially here we're making a bunch of throwaways and flyaways and a bunch of smaller hair strands. So you could then do that with the curve tube brush and just taper it at the end. Essentially it's the same thing, but here the presets were already saved, the fall off was already set, so it was just a bit faster. And now we are going to go over all of these strands, and we are going to pinch them to be thinner and taper more towards the end. Since we're making big stylized chunk of hair, they'll still be pretty big, but we want them a bit smaller. This is just to break off the shape a bit more and just add a sense of more layers. But if you wanted to make a more realistic hair, you should add more strands, more flyaways. There's a way to using your initial pass, the one in part 1, you could use the curve tubes to make very, very more realistic hair. Using the curves, you just lay them on the flow that you have defined in your concept sculpt, and then use the tubes, maybe give them more of a hair strand shape, so that each tube looks like 4 or 5 small strands of hair, and you can really make a more realistic hair using that technique. So it's essentially what we're doing here with the small hair strands, but you could do it, you can make a couple of hundred of those, and it will give you the look of very realistic hairstyle. And if you use it thick enough and on top of your concept hair, and then you merge those small strands with the concept hair, it should be possible. It should be possible to 3D print them, since they would be merging with a big mass. So the exterior would look very detailed, but you'd still have a big mass of watertight geometry just under it. So theoretically, you could 3D print it. So now we're going over our small strands of hair with the hard polish, and you could also pinch that edge we're refining on all these strands, just to sell the overall style we are going for. We don't want those strands to be rounded and lumpy. Now going back with the move topo, we're going to really plant them into the skull, so they're not just they're not just laying on top of the just on top of the hair. They are coming from the inside of the hair mass. But yeah, now essentially we have done the stylized hair. So what you want to do is concept sculpt, so you can problem solve your shapes, the flow of the hair. Then you want to create supporting geometry with polygroups, so that you can have strands of hair that you can easily manage, but still have break off in the overall geometry to have some overlaps. And then you can sculpt in some detail inside of those small polygroups, and then add a bit more flyaways to break off the shape. And now to add an extra layer of hair, I'm making a hair scalp. So this is going to be just a polysphere using Dynamesh, I believe. And that will be the hair coming from under there, like a buzz cut, or maybe or something, just to have some hair coming from below. If you look at the head from certain angles, there's nothing under the hair. Using the rake tool to break that shape into a bunch of smaller strands. Then using diamond standard. This doesn't have to be very precise, because you can only see a tiny bit of it, but it should help sell the idea of undercut. Breaking off that front piece a bit, so it looks more like smaller chunks of hair. Diamond standard in both directions. And that's pretty much it. So you could take it an extra step, add more layers, refine. The more time you'll spend, the better it will be. But essentially, this is all the tools you need to make stylized hair. If you want to follow along, you can grab this model over at Gumroad, and I'll see you guys in the next one.